Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to welcome you to our webinar and to introduce to you who's on the line with you. My name is Stephanie Baskerville. I am the content writer here at ProServeIT, and I have my amazing colleague, Tony Caporaletti. Tony's one of our knowledgeable solutions architects here, specializes in unified communications, which includes all things Microsoft Teams. And so we definitely are excited to have Tony on the line to talk to us about Teams and SharePoint. So I did want to say, again, some of you might have already heard this, but if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, we definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. So you can certainly feel free to use that Q&A tab in our platform today, and we'll get those questions, get to those questions as they come up, or at the end, we'll figure out what the timing looks like. If we can answer the questions throughout the webinar, that's great, but also try to get those to you as soon as possible. So I think that's all of the introduction that's needed from me, Tony. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera here and turn things over to you, and we'll chat about Teams and SharePoint.
Perfect. Thank you, Steph. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Yeah, just before we get started, this is only a 30-minute session, so I'm going to keep it brief just so that we have time to answer some questions. I know there's typically a lot of questions in these webinars. This is not going to be a PowerPoint centric webinar. So yeah, please feel free to ask questions. This webinar is kind of a continuation of the previous webinar we did around Teams. And so I thought it would make a lot of sense to discuss this, because we've got not just Teams now, we've got the whole, Microsoft's new language around this is with modern workplace. And so as we start to transition from, where we were before to being like on-premise and moving things into the cloud world, we have this new way of working, right? So as we start to use more and more services in the clouds, we started with email most time, and then we moved into like Skype for Business, which is primarily it was a chat platform and a kind of like a conferencing and even a phone service at one point at the end. But now we're moving into other services. So we're getting a lot of customers now that ask questions and start to wonder, how do I start to move my data, which was sitting on a file server in my office? What are some of the good practices of getting that data outside of the office and moving it into a cloud service such as SharePoint or Azure file services or things like that? So every customer has different requirements. So today what I thought I'd do is I'd talk a little bit about it, because in the modern workplace stack, we've got SharePoint, we've got Teams, we've got Power Apps, and a few others. And all these things kind of work together to form that modern workplace, or that holistic solution and the new way of working. So it truly is a different way to work than we used to. Most people were typically working on files that either resided on a file server in their network, and maybe been using map drives before, like lettered SHG drives and things like that. And then there was permissions wrapped around those particular files and content, etc. So what does that look like going into the SharePoint environment? And again, as we look at some of these other features like Teams, we talked a little bit more about Teams last week. Today I'll focus a little bit more on the SharePoint side, because really the back end of Microsoft Teams is SharePoint. So anytime you're dropping a file into Microsoft Teams, any kind of settings like that, those are really kind of saved in the SharePoint as the back end. You don't necessarily see it unless you go into the admin center and look for it and make some changes. The other side of that is, now, what is the best way to work with those documents that I have today? And maybe that file server or Google or Dropbox, something like that. So I've put on the screen here just a couple of things to kind of be aware of. These are the things that I typically talk about a lot when I'm working with customers. Is how does Teams and OneDrive fit into this new modern workplace with SharePoint, or how you're doing business today? Because a lot of times customers come and say, I want to use Teams. I want to do this and that, but okay, I want to use SharePoint. So I will then usually ask, is that okay? You want to use SharePoint? Are you aware that Teams and SharePoint kind of work together? What are some of the considerations that we need to be aware of as we want to start looking at some of these different features, right? So a couple of these things on the screen here we have that are important are information architecture. What does it look like now if I want to move my data into like a SharePoint environment? Am I going to have the same kind of drive mappings that I used to have before? Well, the short answer is not exactly. There's a different way to organize data when we move into like a SharePoint environment. So what we do is we spend some time with you and kind of going through what your company does on a day-to-day basis of how you guys typically work, and then we try to fit that into that new information architecture. And obviously, security and compliance are really huge components of this now, as we start to transition out of servers in our office or in a data center, and moving it into a cloud-hosted service such as Azure or any of the other AWS service. How do I secure my data? What are some of the best practices or recommended practices when moving into some kind of service like that? Again, data classification. How am I going to organize this data? Do I need to tag it? Do I need to have some kind of other things, I guess, associated with those documents? How do I get easy access to it? There's solutions within the Office 365 environment that can give you better visibility into some of those documents. And then these are some of the things that we go through with you when we're doing kind of a discovery and design phase for SharePoint. So it's important to kind of think about these things as you're going and wanting to move away from that particular solution that you have today into this new solution. And then lastly, this is usually the last step too, is how do I get my data from point A to point B? And there's a couple ways to do that, right? There's built-in native tools within the Microsoft world that can move data. This might require a third-party tool. There's a number of them out there that are available to be able to move documents, more seamlessly in some cases into the SharePoint or OneDrive world. And then lastly, requirements around end user adoption training. This is a big one because as we move into this new solution, it's a different way of working. And the last thing that we want to do is we want to, push out something to our end user community that is not necessarily going to be accepted. So we have to prepare them for it. And the right way to prepare them is to do some sort of training around the new solution to get them comfortable with some of the basic use cases and how-tos with doing certain things. So again, these are some of the things that we talk about, and we offer all of these services at ProServeIT as well. So I'll pause there for a second. Does anybody have questions around that? Any of that stuff so far?
Doesn't look like we have any open questions at this point, Tony.
Okay.
So again, folks, you can use the Q&A tab if you'd like to ask a question. We can definitely get those answered for you. But I think we're good to move on for now.
Okay, perfect. And let's move this down back up here. So I thought what I would do is, we've talked about Teams last time, right? And how this kind of works with, how we're collaborating with our end users, right? So I thought I'd just give you an example of kind of how I work, I guess, on a daily basis, and just to show you an example to give you something to think about as if you're using Teams today, or maybe they're one of those people who are thinking about moving into a SharePoint environment. And I think that showing you kind of like a simple way of how we work will give you some ideas. And again, if you want help, we can further help you. So, we've all been used to kind of using email a lot for communication prior, but with the advent of Teams, we're starting to move more into the chat functionality with Microsoft Teams, and even the group communication with the actual groups and teams that are created. So let me just make this a little bit bigger. My computer is quite slow today, so I apologize for the delay and the lag, but it's not your video that's doing it, it's my computer. So as you notice, that there's a ton of different teams that we can create in Microsoft Teams, right? And these would all be based, on different user groups, or however you may be collaborating in your network or your company today. One of the things I typically try to point out is this Teams platform is kind of a window into some of the other features and functionality within the Microsoft world as well. And I say that thinking about SharePoint in this case. So we've got most of our documents, I would say the majority of our documents live in SharePoint today. And so I pretty much live in SharePoint. And the nice thing about it is that since it's in SharePoint, I have a number of ways to access that data. The typical way to do it is, oops, let me move this over here. Again, sorry, apologize for the lag. Most people are used to working in Windows Explorer, okay? And so the easy way to show people is, I usually say that this is what most people are used to seeing. Maybe over here on the left, you might have had those map drives that you have, like the letter drives, H, G, S, T, whatever it might be. Well, in the SharePoint world, we've got your company Office 365 tenant. In this case, it's called ProServeIT Corporation. And underneath here, this would kind of be your replacement for those map drives that you might have had. And here I've got just 4 of them now that I'm spending a lot of time in. So these are the ones that I have synchronized to my local desktop. And the nice thing about it is that you can have access to all number of, they're called document libraries in this case. I can have access to a number of them, but I don't have to have all of them synchronized to my desktop. And that's nice because, that could typically add up to a ton of data if I was going to synchronize all that. And another beautiful thing is that once it synchronizes this particular document library, it's not actually synchronizing everything. It's only really synchronizing the list just to give you some visibility into that, what's in there. Until you go and access the data, it's just actually sitting on the cloud. You'll notice that's kind of highlighted here with a cloud in the status bar. And once you dig into a document folder and an actual document that you've opened, you'll see a green check mark here, which means that this file is now sitting on your machine as a local copy, and you can work on that offline if you were to be disconnected from the internet, which is nice. And then once you get reestablished to the web, it will synchronize all of the changes that you made at that time. Okay, so this is the way that I typically work. I still like working in File Explorer, so I can access that here and most of my content through these 2 different mechanisms. The other thing you'll notice here is I've got my OneDrive account, which is ProServeIT Corporation, and these are my documents that might be corporate documents that are kind of personal related to me. I'll store them in here. I've got them all separated through files, and then over here, I've also got my personal OneDrive account. So this is the one that has nothing to do with ProServeIT. These are the things that I have for myself, and I have a separate account on this, synchronized to this workstation that I can easily access. That'll make sense so far? Any questions from anywhere?
Just got a question in. Yes, if you have your SharePoint linked or mapped to your computer, is documents located there private, i.e. not editable by others? Are documents that are located there private? Yeah.
For SharePoint, is that what the question was? If the SharePoint document library is synchronized?
Yes, it looks like, yeah, they're not asking about OneDrive, they're asking about SharePoint.
Okay, so if that document library is synchronized to your machine, all of the governance around that document library is done from the SharePoint like admin side, right? So it doesn't really matter whether or not it's synchronized to your desktop. it's not only you that have access to it, which I think maybe it'll make more sense if what happens is if I open a document here, if I go into this and I see that, well, I'll pick any of these, doesn't matter. Mobile. Well, there's no Word documents in here. I can't really edit that one. So let me go back to another one. Yeah, so if I open up a Word document here, I have access to it, obviously, because I'm able to see it. I'm able to open it. Whoever has access in the back end, whoever's been given access in the back end of SharePoint, whenever that document library was created, is still going to have access. And again, one of the great things about SharePoint and this cloud environment now is that I can co-author documents with another person. So we can have multiple people inside the same document making changes at the same time, and all those changes are being reflected in real time as you guys are working on them. And this, we use this feature constantly. This is one of the real benefits of Teams and SharePoint, being able to do this. Hopefully that answered your question. But the other thing I wanted to move on to is that, that was one way of accessing the data, but I also have access to a number of teams, as you can see here. And one of them is this Solutions Architect team, which is the team that I'm on. Inside here, there's a bunch of different files. And what I've done is that if I'm in Microsoft Teams and I don't want to exit the platform, and I just want to kind of go into this window of documents, I've got this sales and marketing customer documents, which is the same thing as this one, right? So I've got sales and marketing customer documents also added into that Teams channel. So now that I can access these documents from within this particular team, and I don't have to exit it, go into File Explorer and open it up, I can just open it up right from here, right? And it's the same content. All of the governance is done in the back end from within SharePoint. All the permissioning, security, compliance, all that stuff is done in the back end. And now you're accessing the content from here based on whatever your Teams channel access is. And all the other stuff is done from the SharePoint Admin Center. So to kind of wrap it up, I know we're already at 20 minutes. I've been kind of going on and on. And again, this is a lot to take in just 30 minutes, but it's just trying to give you something to think about here, as you start to want to transition from an on-prem environment to a cloud service. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do with SharePoint and Teams, and maybe the right solution for your company is maybe we just want to put documents inside of Microsoft Teams and not use the entire SharePoint platform. That may be okay, and that may be the right solution for you. So I think I'll probably stop there and pause for a minute and see if anybody has any questions, because I know it can be kind of confusing sometimes.
Nothing else that I'm seeing yet,
okay.
Tony, but I'll keep monitoring.
I will also point out a few other things that some other people use. I found out that there's some other members of my team use this little files tab here from within Teams. You'll notice that there's a OneDrive cloud storage account that's here. This was here by default when I established my Office 365 account and logged into it. That was there by default. So if I click on it, it's going to show me all the documents that I have in OneDrive, which is kind of nice. I don't particularly use this view very often, but the other thing I like is that the recent documents that I've been working on are all here. And it's an easy way for me to get access to those documents. If I'm trying to think of something, where was that document? I can just go into this here and find it pretty well easy at that point. What other thing I think would be important to point out, you can also add different cloud storage here. And that also could encompass even Dropbox, Box, ShareFile, and Google Drive. So if you have those different accounts that you guys are working with, you can add them in here for easy access into the Teams platform. And the other thing I want to show is maybe just kind of a quick touch point on that. is, again, wow, it's very slow. Apologies, everybody.
No problem.
So this tab that I just clicked on is the tasks by planner. So Microsoft decided to rename it again. So now we have it, it's all tasks. The application was planner. I think they're still kind of using planner to some sort of extent, but oh, great. Let's try again.
Demo gods are not happy for you. Not
That's
helping you.
I don't use that often, but it is a nice app. There's a lot of companies and a lot of users that do use that app a lot. I just don't particularly use it, and there's been no real been no real push for me to use it, so it's not something I'm using.
Yeah, we are getting some questions in here, Tony. So let me run through them. We've got Andrea asking, can you show us how or where permissions are set up for various people to access or not access documents?
So I can do it here. I'll do it in really two places. One place for sure. The other place is more of a SharePoint thing, and that's more cumbersome. And I don't have anything in that demo environment particularly, but I'll show you what's done here. So if I go into a team, inside the team, let's say for the solutions architect team. Well, first of all, if I want to manage the team, I can just go here. I can even add a channel. I can add a member to the team here easily. And if you are the owner of the team, if you've created it or if you've been, added as an owner of the team, then you can go in and configure permissions. Let me try to find one that I actually created here. I think.
Are you an owner of the webinars team, Tony? I think you might be.
I don't know if I am.
Did I make you
Hang
one?
on a second. Yeah, so then here I've created this Sage on Ambulance one, so I can easily go and add a member to this one since I'm an owner here and make changes. The difference in here is that your permission levels in the Teams platform are not nearly as granular as they will be in the SharePoint environment. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is that this might work for you. A lot of small companies, and they're kind of just getting started, they may just decide that, oh, I want to just create, I've only got a couple of users in the company. I just want to create a couple different, teams and channels for these users. And then I can put all my documents in there and then create some really basic permissions. And then we're off to the races. For some of the larger companies, this may not work, and they require a lot more governance and oversight into those documents, and they have a lot more complexity in their network. So a lot of times that won't work for them. Let me see if I can pull this up. But if you're going to make changes into the back end of SharePoint, you got to go into the admin center, and this is where you would do it inside here, right? There's a ton of different settings and stuff in here, and actually that would be done more on the file level than specifically. So you'd go into the file level of that document library, and then you'd have to adjust permissions from there. Hopefully that answers your question. I know I didn't get too deep. I don't want to get too technical given the time that we have.
Yeah, and Andrea, if you do have any other, like a follow-up question to that, you can certainly reach out to us at cloud@proservit.com, and we can definitely, take that offline and help you out with that and sort of understand a little bit more about what you're looking for and how we can assist you too. So another question we have here, are you able to talk a little bit about Microsoft Viva connections? I think that's newer. That one,
I will say no at this point, just because we've only got a couple minutes left and I don't want to dive into something like that. So I'd rather leave that one for another day.
Fair enough. Avi, if you want to reach out to us, we can probably take that offline for you as well and help you out with that. There's another one here. Janine is asking, when training users, how much training do you give them on SharePoint itself? Do you teach them how to work in SharePoint online, or do you focus on File Explorer /Teams?
Yeah, actually there's a number of ways we offer training. One is through like live online sessions, and those sessions for end users typically would range around kind of how-tos, and that would be like an hour session for groups of like say 25, just to go through some of the basic functionality, how to do certain things. Working in File Explorer might be one of them. Working inside the web application would be another one. But again, it's an hour session, gives time for users to ask questions to the trainer, and just do some basic functionality. There's also another part of that, which would be kind of site administrator training, which is more admin related. There's different things that they go through, and that's like a 2 to 4 hour session. So definitely more involved in that one, because they would be sort of kind of very basic admins to some level, and there's a lot more to go through as part of that. And then on top of that, just kind of closing it off, we do offer kind of video series around SharePoint, and even training decks, like PowerPoint decks around the SharePoint platform.
Awesome. I don't think we have any other open questions at this time, Tony. So did we want to maybe talk about some next steps here and get into those at all, or?
Yeah,
We got 2 minutes left.
Well, I think one thing I just wanted to point out is that we have the capability to help you kind of go through this transition. I know it's not an easy one for a lot of people, and a lot of customers now, and companies are going through this transition of, how do I get my documents to the cloud safely and secure? So we have like I say, a call to action. Let me pull it up here, which would be, so we offer a number of different things, but usually a good place to start is to do a bit of an envisioning session. So we've got this modern workplace workshop that we like to go through with customers, just to get an idea of how you guys are doing things today with your current workspace, and managing content, managing data, even talking about intranets type things. So it's a couple days of effort just to go through and get a sense, show you some of the art of the possible through demos and things like that, and get a sense of where you want to go for next steps, and kind of put that down into a high level timeline. And then typically the next step out of that would be like a design session for either SharePoint / Teams, and then even then implementation, and then data migration, etc. So this is available for you guys up till June 30th to save 20%. If you wanted to take advantage of this offer, please reach out to us at cloud@ProServeIT, or myself directly, or Stephanie directly. Any one of our account managers can help you. Usually that would be at some point, if you're talking about SharePoint or Teams or anything in the modern workplace stack for Microsoft, would probably end up on my desk or one of my colleagues' desks as well. So appreciate you guys spending 30 minutes with me here today. I hopefully gave you something to think about. And I look forward to talking with you soon, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tony. And thanks, everybody. Like Tony said, thanks so much for joining us today. And we do hope that you got stuff out of this. If you do want to reach out to us at all, cloud@ProServeIT.com. I've put it into the chat there. And you can definitely reach out to us, and we'd be happy to have a chat with you, or take things offline. And we would encourage you to do so, because Tony knows his stuff and he's awesome to deal with. So happy to, yeah, no problem, Tony. Happy to have everybody on the line. We do hope that everybody stays safe and healthy, and we will see you in the next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend, good long weekend.
That's true. Long weekend's coming up.